Just on the border of your waking mind, there lies another time, where darkness and light are one. And as you tread the halls of sanity, you feel so glad to be unable to go beyond. I have a message from another time. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, your premier destination, the final destination. This is like the bus when it's at the end. This is the end of it. This is the end of the line, the final destination for what we feel is the best in music and movie podcasting. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it's the
Did
hub.
you say the hub?
It is the hub.
I like that. The hub. I like that better than final destination. The hub.
Yeah, final destination is a little ominous, but the hub. Yeah, I like. Yeah, hub. I think hub works.
This is the hub.
The station.
Yeah, the hub is like different things coming and going, and
that's right.
Bustle.
Yep.
Final destination is like the janitor's sweeping up, and there's no one left. It's closed. Yeah, you know what? Yeah,
3 a.m.
Yeah, it's like, the bus driver's like all alone on the bus, or there's some guy sleeping in the back. That you have to roust, and he doesn't know where he is. I like the hub better.
Goodness. Yeah.
Hub is better. Comings and goings. That's you found us regardless of what you want to call us. We're here, and thank you for joining us each week on our excursion through the minds of Dean and Eric and the music and movies that they love and that they connect to. And this episode is no exception. This episode actually has a long pedigree. Eric has fought tooth and nail to do this episode, and we had many back and forth conversations with him saying to me, why don't you want to do it? You're the guy that loves this album. Why don't you want to do the episode? And this was early on. This was even before we even released an episode, when we were kind of practicing. We were practicing and doing dry runs and kind of talking about what the podcast would be and what did we want to talk about, and and Eric was definitely about the big splash. Eric wanted to come out of the gate in Tusk and ELO time. He was just throwing lefts and rights and roundhouses. I mean, he was going for the KO. And I'm like, no, Tusk, no, not yet. ELO, no. And he's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. You couldn't understand it. Right. You were really to this
coming
day,
from the point of view.
Right?
Well, I'm kind of coming from the point of view of albums that we connected on. So that was, I thought was the podcast. The whole point of the podcast from the very beginning was supposed to be talking about, but hey, I'm glad we waited. It's not a bad thing. It's some things are worth the wait. So here we go.
How often do you eat dessert before your meal?
True that.
Sometimes.
Yeah, that's
sometimes.
Yeah. Right. No, that's a good point. And, very valid point. So I'm not arguing with you now.
And Eric would keep throwing it up every so often. This conversation didn't go away. Eric would kind of throw it up. I'm like, nah. And he still was like, why? Like, this is your favorite album. Like, he just didn't understand. Like, he couldn't see what my mindset was. And my mindset was, I don't know, maybe I was afraid to do it. Maybe I was afraid to talk about this album, perhaps.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Or maybe put, doing it, then it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, we did it.
Yeah, that could be too.
So there was a lot of different conflicting things, and maybe a little bit about, that, once I share this, then everybody knows.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
So there's a whole different. There's a lot of different things there that could be going on about this album. And that's how special this album is.
It's a sense of ownership. We, sometimes we're into something a little bit odder, a little bit off the cuff, a little bit from left field. That you're right. We don't want to share because it's like it sits very nicely in our back pockets, and we got that to go to, our own little corner to go to every once in a while when things are too popular or too, a certain group or certain things are just, everybody loves. And I totally understand it. I do. So,
and especially in the case, and if you didn't know, we're talking about the album from Electric Light Orchestra Time from 1981. We actually never said it yet, but that's okay. And especially in the case of ELO, where they've had the career renaissance, right? Where now all of a sudden everybody loves ELO. I love Mr. Blue Sky. Oh, la da da. They're so great. No, and I'm kind of like, like Fair Weather Friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we were, back in 81 or points before, and then there are fans that are even older than us.
That's right.
Right. That can claim it as well. Right. So, there's a little bit of that as well, of kind of in the back of my mind, like, I told you so type of thing, like, like that, like little bit, bittersweet, but,
and, listening to this album again, definitely, it's never been more clear as you bring it up. You're absolutely right about it. It's never been more clear, and that's really what the album's about. So we'll get to that as we explore it. So yeah.
So let's do the stats. There's not a lot of stats because, believe it or not, this wasn't really a big album. This was kind of a floppy flop. Released in July of 1981, so that makes it 41 years old. As always, all songs written by Jeff Lynne, and the album is produced by Jeff Lynne, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
So
that's
Jeff
the way,
Lynne
the way,
is
the way
ELO.
life's meant to. It's the way life's meant to be.
If you didn't know that by now,
and we're gonna forego the bell, so you're gonna get one bell because otherwise we'll be doing the bell all night.
Well, what's the point? We're talking about it.
Yeah,
but just let people know that this is the subject tonight.
Yes,
so
this is it. So there's only one. That was the bell ring you're going to get.
All right. Yeah.
Not to beat it into the ground. There was 4 singles released from this album. Hold On Tight, which hit number 10. It was a top 10 single, believe it or not. Twilight hit number 38. Ticket to the Moon didn't chart or was not a U.S. release, maybe UK perhaps.
Yeah.
Rain is Falling, just outside the top 100, hit number 101. It's called the Bubbling Under chart because it didn't crack the top 100. The Way Life's Meant to Be was the 4th single, and that didn't chart either in the U.S. So again, and this sold an anemic 500,000 copies. Didn't even go platinum.
I don't even remember none of those songs except for Hold On Tight being played on the radio. I've never heard.
Maybe Twilight I may have heard once or twice, but not to the degree of Hold On Tight. And even Hold On Tight for top 10, I don't recall hearing it all that much. But and then 500,000 copies, not a lot, didn't even go platinum.
Oof.
And their album before, this was Xanadu. It was the soundtrack to Xanadu. They had one side, Olivia Newton-John had one half of the album, and ELO had the other half of the album. Their last album proper was Discovery from 1979. That went 1 times platinum, so that sold 1 million copies. This one went 500,000, and their 2 albums after this would only sink further. It was kind of there was music. The music in the 80s was in a transitional phase, and ELO was in a transitional phase. It's just that their transitional phase didn't match what was happening at the time, even though on this album, they were the forerunners.
Absolutely.
Of what was going to be happening, because we just did an episode about Abacab Genesis from 1981, decidedly different sounding. When we talk about 80s music, we talk about the synthesizers and Flock of Seagulls, Iran, that kind of stuff. That didn't really hit till 83, 84 is really when you saw that shift. So before that, it was still kind of some 70s vestiges, but in 1981, Jeff Lynne kind of he jettisons the string section, for the most part. For
the most part,
that classic ELO sound is gone. It is it is locked away in the 70s, like that whole big bombastic orchestral lush ELO sound that people, that you associated with Mr. Blue Sky. That this is decidedly not that.
Right. Very electronic. This album, ironically, is saying this is what the 80s is going to sound like. That's Jeff Lynne really being, I guess the album is that self-aware. It's like, he's actually hitting it right on the nose as a concept. This is how I think the 80s is going to sound. And using all the tools of the day. I think there were a few artists probably in Europe that he had been listening to at the time, maybe OMD, I think Gary Newman, playing with synthesizers, of course, Brian Eno, people of that ilk.
Yeah, it was still there. It was there, but it was still underground.
But it wasn't really used in a pop sense yet. But he totally wrote this album. The entire concept of it, sonically speaking, is just that. And it hits it right on the head. This is what this is the 80s. This is what it's going to sound like. And it's, I don't know, somewhat, I guess, in a sense, a little bit prophetic,
I mean,
musically.
I remember at the time, and the album is called Time, oddly enough. And at the time, it sounded very busy, and it sounded like, oh my God, what is going on? There's just so much stuff going on to digest, because older ELO was orchestral, so you can kind of pick out there's rock elements and then there's orchestral elements.
Yeah.
Now you've got pop songs, but with all this other like chirps and beeps and things that are going on that you need to kind of keep track of it. And he does that's the great thing about this album and Secret Messages, is they're very similar, but because they all have this stuff going on, but it all makes sense. It kind of, everything fits, just like he would make the orchestral stuff fit his whatever he was doing in the 70s. This new ELO,
he's almost replacing it in a sense. Like the lushness is still there, but it's not strings. It's technology, synthesizers. It's very much so.
And this would be their the ELO's second concept album.
Mm-hmm.
Their first one was El Dorado, about a dreamer, a guy who dreams and is taken to a faraway place in his mind. This is about a person being transported into the future, way forward into the future. He wakes up one day and he's all of a sudden not in the land that he knew. He's in the same place, but none of the people are there and none of the things are there. But it's what is it like to be in the future, but without the people and love? We all think, oh, it'd be great to go to the future, but in this album, that's the centerpiece, is going to the future, but he's yearning for what is left behind. He's yearning for the person that he loves, and where and how can is it possible to contact her? And, things are different. Everything kind of looks similar, but it's not the same. And how he wishes he could go back.
Yeah.
Probably, Jeff Lynne is at his lyrical best, because he's not known for deep lyrics. He's known for lyrics that serve the song. So when he's making, doing a concept album, is really kind of focusing in. And when you listen, these songs don't particularly tell a story. They're more about things that happen or feelings as a result of living in the future. So it's not a story of I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's more I'm here. I'm looking back. At what used to be and missing someone and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It conceptually, I think it kind of, it almost like he hits a brick wall, because basically every song is just about him talking about the past and wanting to get back there. There really isn't any resolution to this story. But I realized as I was listening to it that he created somewhat of a paradox, in my opinion. I think the album kind of talks about looking ahead into the future, but then looking back on it. And I think what it's really saying for me, the message of the album is cherish the past, but don't lament it. It's, because you end up nothing with heartbreak by doing so. Like, because time's going to march on no matter what. So even if he does make it back, this character, it's not going to be the same, and I think that's the meaning of what the interpretation I take.
Yeah. And I think the final two songs kind of touch on that. The final two songs are 21st Century Man and Hold On Tight.
Yeah.
Where he's resigned. He's a 21st century man now. There's no going back. He's, one of the lyrics, you stepped out of a dream, believing everything was gone. If you can return with what you've learned, they'll kiss the ground you walked upon, because you're a futuristic man if you can go back, but you're now a 21st century man. And then hold on tight to your dreams, because you're stuck here. You're not going to be able to go back. So it's kind of, there's a lot there, a lot of interesting concepts that Jeff Lynne toys with, and he couches it in a lot of, this is his most vocally diverse recording as well. He's singing falsetto. There's a lot of different kind of vocal techniques that he uses that you don't hear before and you don't really hear after, which is one of the reasons why I love this album so much, because he's just in it. He's in a different voice for many of these different songs, not because he's playing different characters. It's just the songs are just so different. And the sound of ELO is so different that he's kind of changing how he presents it. This isn't like the do ya kind of gruff voice. It's, some of the stuff is gentler and some of it is harder when it needs to be like, is this the way life's meant to be? But, I think about From the End of the World, which is almost like a breathy falsetto.
Yeah, it's like a decidedly higher register. His voice. And I think the attempt was made consciously. I think at the time he was saying that he wanted to sound like John Lennon, or kind of evoke the Beatlesque. And there are, like 21st Century Man, certainly. I think that is legitimately him, trying to write a day in the life right there. I mean, that to me is...
I got Fool on the Hill from that too.
Okay,
that very solitary kind of
Yeah.
vocal, like Paul McCartney-ish,
right. Mm-hmm.
Day After Day, Alone on the Hill, and 21st Century Man has like the same kind of lyrical content.
Mm-hmm.
Penny in your pocket, suitcase in your hand. I was kind of, there's a lot there. I even now on this listen, I hear shades of Roy Orbison in some of the songs. I've always heard Jerry Lee Lewis and Hold On Tight. I've always, even from the first time I heard it, there's a little bit of that Jerry Lee Lewis kind of stuff. There's rockabilly on this album, but it's got electronic backing.
And he's also using a lot more vocoder on this record, and just sort of like more effects driven, like to really push those vocals in a different way, too. So yeah, it was different. And I remember when we were waiting for the album to come out.
Me too.
We were talking about it, and of course we didn't have anything back in the day.
Me, you, and Glenn.
Yeah. I
remember
our friend Glenn, and we were talking about like, what's it going to be like? Because we found out that Dean and I were big ELO fans. We had met, but we were already both fans. Dean more so. I came to find out he was the ELO guru.
Well, duh.
So, but this was the album that this was a brand new effort that we, as friends, we were getting to know each other more, and then we were anticipating the brand new record.
Yeah, we could gather around it,
and we were. Obviously, we didn't have the internet or anything, so we couldn't find out anything about the making of it. But we would read, and I think it was Cream magazine or even Rolling Stone.
Like information came from three places: Hit
That's
Parade,
right.
Cream, or Rolling Stone magazine. Yeah. Those were the only three places that you got pretty much like real music news, information, and you had to scour, you had to read every little blurb or thing just to kind of catch a line or two about something, like, oh, ELO working on a new album. Like it might be in a news line with a whole bunch of other little quotes, and you had to like really kind of dig through this stuff.
And this was
what your little nugget you're looking for.
And don't forget, this was pre MTV too. So we're right on the cusp of that, of all of that stuff coming in. So I think it was written that he was trying to make, I think he boasted as saying that he was trying to make Sgt. Pepper. Do you remember that?
I don't think so.
Nah, I don't think he achieved that, but I think that was the intent at the time. Was like, I think we're going to try to do our own, like a Sgt. Pepper type. But I think in a way, because it's so different, musically speaking, I think in effect he did change their sound immensely. I mean,
it is cited as one of the most influential ELO albums from artists since then. They cite Time as like, wow, this was something that was really... So from that aspect, sure. From an influential aspect, I may be, because it certainly didn't, it wasn't their biggest selling. This was actually, kind of ELO on the other side of the mountain, as it were. This was the decline. Jeff Lynne
critics didn't care for it at all.
No,
either.
At the time, at the time,
they were like,
at the time, what is this? It's weird. It's corny. What is this about? And we were loving it. I remember. I remember where I was when I bought it. Like the whole thing. Like Eric said, we were waiting for it. We were talking about it. Like, all we knew, we knew the title, and that was it. It's like, it's called Time. We're kind of like, what's it going to be? And I remember that. Me, you, and Glenn were sitting on just up the street from my house. There's a little parking lot area, and we're kind of sitting on the wall, and we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my family went to Lake George every year. And 81 would be the final year I went with my parents, because my brother and my sister were older, and they didn't do that vacation stuff anymore.
So
I went with them because I was still young. I was like, okay, just go. And I remember, going to town, Lake George is a big vacation spot. They got arcades and amusement parks and all that kind of stuff, and pools, swimming, all that great stuff. And walked into the record store, and I remember seeing the cassette and it said time, and it just said time, and underneath like in little like thing electric. I was like, oh my god, there it is.
Yeah.
And I had money, I had my own money, and I bought the cassette. And at that point, I didn't have my boombox like I used to have. I used to have like one of those Panasonics boom boxes. I had this little one speaker cassette player with it had like one round speaker, and then it had the cassette deck next to it, and then like a radio. It was like Monteverdi was the brand or something. That's what I don't know what happened, how I fell so far from having a really nice boombox, maybe because of the battery situation, but and I played it. I remember playing it and listening to it and being like, oh wow, Take It to the Moon kind of sounds like the Bee Gees in the middle, like the vocals, and just kind of, it was the one, right? This is the story. This is the first ELO album that I bought with my own money. This marked that transition. We've talked about it in maybe in our live shows or other episodes where I was, big into the Village People. Then all of a sudden, like that just kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And I think it was with this album, like things changed. I became a listener of music and not just, I like pop music and this is cool and I'll get this, I'll get that. When Time came out, it was just such a watershed moment, I think, for me at that time, that things just changed. Yeah, music. I became like a serious music listener, as serious as you can when you're 15. I was actually 14 at the time, hadn't turned 15 yet, but that's when music is kind of like now, then you started looking for, finding out, like I said, we had to read Hit Parade or Cream or not, Rolling Stone to find out information. So you started to kind of educate yourself about stuff. You start to find information on your own.
That's right.
Because you wanted to learn about what other art, and then by default, when you're looking for stuff that you want, you're reading other articles about other artists or other music, and maybe filing it away in your head, not really, oh yeah, I don't care about that. But then that knowledge just kind of goes in, and it goes into the dumpster and it kind of sits there. And then, I remember, and you remember reading about this or that, and then you kind of get a base of musical knowledge, amazing times.
It was, and not a bad album to say that this is one of those albums that changed, that literally changed your life. I mean, I could totally see that as being one of the premier records to do that. I mean, I can only imagine back in the day, like albums like Pet Sounds could have been that for us had we were that aware. Like then we were old enough to appreciate stuff like that and the Beatles, but this was good enough for me, man. I got it on, I bought it on vinyl, and I played side one, like down. I mean, I freaking worn down that side completely. I just love side one so much because it just flows. And I thought it was special. At the time, I thought this was a very special effort. It was like compared to their older stuff, I was like, which was great, but I think that, man, this is so.
It was magical. You had you have this prologue, which I read in the beginning.
Yeah, it sounded like a Cylon to me. Yeah, I was really into that stuff.
Yeah, it's like this processed voice, kind of starting the journey off.
Yeah,
and then you get all this weird chirpy stuff, and then then you have Bev Bevan's bombastic drums. The last we would probably see of that for a while as well.
Yeah.
And the song Twilight starts, and there's just so much going on. It's so busy and so swirling, but it all makes sense. Everything's kind of locked in. And then the next song just starts. Yours truly, 2095, which is just a creepy song. Like the more you think about it, that was a foretelling of AI and like. Of Siri or Alexa to an extent of this person, the guy is transported to the future and he encounters a female robot that looks like the girl that he loved from way back. And he's trying not to fall in love with her. And he's describing, she's got a telephone inside of her, like all this computer stuff that back then actually he was probably using jargon that was ahead of its time as well.
Yeah.
And then it's creepy because, the robot says, "Is that what you want?" Like,
yeah,
it's a robot. Like I'll do whatever you want, but it's kind of almost like sentient. Like, is that what you want?
Can I be the replacement? Can I be her for you? And all those themes are.
But in a weird way, the way she says it is like, is that what you want?
Shit anyway, man. Look at me. You hear me talk about this stuff all the time. I'm such a geek for sci-fi, specific movies, specific, this album hit it right on the head there. And it was just like, yeah, could be the soundtrack for something, like I want to see this movie. I want to see,
someone wrote a novel based on this actually a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Which very small.
We were into heavy metal and all that kind of stuff. This was right up that alley, in my opinion. This was just so.
This was called one of the. I think this was also called one of the first concept albums about time travel. Oddly enough, and it took until '81. And then the following song, back then, I'm going to read you this lyric. Back then, it was very corny. But tell me how you feel about it now, right? This is the opening to the song "Ticket to the Moon." Okay, and here's the lyric. Remember the good old 1980s when things were so uncomplicated. I wish I could go back there again and everything could be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hello.
Back then, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, remember the girl? Now, 41 years later, this lyric kind of hits.
It certainly does. We are that character. We're that time traveler.
It had a timer on it, and we're now those people in the future.
Yeah, that's Jeff Lynne's brilliance here. I think this is what he was trying to convey. Was like we're I'm already looking into the future. We're going to get there, and we're going to look back on this. Not necessarily maybe this album, but we're going to look back on these times and things, and
and that hits.
Hello, it's so this album has taken on that.
It's age. It's met its age. Like
it's
back
met its
then when
age,
that came out, I was like, oh, this is kind of corny. Like while you're saying the good old 1980s,
corny, but because it was ahead of its time.
Yeah,
it was really ahead of its time, and I dug it. I didn't think it was corny at all. I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is the paradigm. He's already talking about the 80s, and it hasn't even really happened yet. It's just coming out. And he does reference 1981 in
The Way Life's Meant to Be with its ivory towers and its plastic flowers. I wish I was back in 1981. Like, because he's walking down the streets of the same place that he was in, but in the future, and everything is artificial and it's fake, and it's man-made. And he's saying, I wish I could just go back to when things were just more natural and I was in my era. So it hits so much now,
right? I mean, we took things for granted then, but I don't know. But but it's like, I mean, we're doing this podcast and we're talking about all these really, and when you said, like you didn't really want to do time because you felt like it's over. I feel that way sometimes about a lot of other stuff that we do too. It's like, I'm not going to listen to this album right away because we just talked about it, right? We're not going to revisit this anytime soon, eventually, but not right now because I get that. I get that. And no more evident with this album because this album really touches upon that very subject. And there's a sort of melancholia to this thing. It's like, even though a lot of the songs are upbeat and brass and poppy, and there's like the music kind of reflected that imagery of looking back already, like that sort of sadness that you might feel looking back on your
it kind of
memories.
Fits now. You're right. You're right. You someone that hasn't listened to this album could probably listen to this album and feel like it was made now as to be nostalgic to look back, but it was made then to be nostalgic in the future.
That's right.
Right? Like,
and that's the paradox.
It's actually the opposite. This wasn't made now as a throwback of, hey, remember the 80s, things were cool.
No.
This was made in the 80s predicting that the 80s would be looked back on
how we're going to feel in the future. Exactly.
Yeah, it was so much simpler. I wish I could go back again and everything could be the same.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it really is, and maybe hopefully people that if you haven't listened to Time, this is an album you need to listen to in one sitting. This isn't a piecemeal experience. You kind of need to, and I suggest if you can, if you listen on Spotify or whatever, pull up the lyrics because it's really going to kind of help connect you to everything that's going on. Because the music, there is a lot of going on with the music, but the lyrics are kind of really, like I said, it's his strongest lyrical work because of the themes and the through lines that he's trying to kind of connect everything with. But of course, you can't. You said 21st Century Man was kind of like the Beatles. He channels the Beach Boys also I think he's done it. This is the second time he's done it with the same song.
Okay.
On the album Out of the Blue, there's the song called Across the Border.
Yeah.
Which is kind of,
Okay, I see what you're
The
saying.
way
Yeah,
life's meant to be is the same type of thing, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
it's Heroes and Villains by the Beach Boys.
Hmm.
It's Heroes
Yeah,
and Villains.
it is.
It's Heroes and Villains by the Beach Boys. And I didn't. And the funny thing is I got into ELO way before the Beach Boys, so I probably had heard Heroes and Villains, not really knowing it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then after I got into the Beach Boys and really were listening to Heroes and Villains and Smile and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, wait, this kind of sounds. I'm like tapping my fingers. I'm like, something sounds familiar here. And it was, On the Border from Out of the Blue and The Way Life's Meant to Be are absolute kind of adaptations of that lyrical or that melodic way that the lyrics are sung. It absolutely has a hand.
And the chord structure is good. The phrasing, and it's interesting to note that he's using a little bit more analog in songs like that too, like the baritone guitar steps in, like that. It's just
great.
Like retro,
twangy,
and this appeals. And I think this is why this album has much more of a cult following, because the retro futurists are really into this album.
It's a hybrid.
I know it was a big hit in Japan.
Yeah,
and I believe that. I mean, come on. There's no doubt. Like, even my son, who's really getting really into anime and stuff right now, he listened to the album. He fucking loves it. He's just like, this album's great. I'm like, he goes, we're doing time. He's like, yeah. I mean, he's like, that's a really cool album. I'm like, it really is.
Yeah. And you had to be there.
Yep.
You had to be there when no one was listening to it
except for us. I'm blown away that it did. Wow, 500,000 copies. I did not know that.
Nothing.
That's just wow.
That's
wow.
nothing. And
I think
what did it do? I didn't even. What was the chart? Did I even look up the chart? Billboard. Billboard. It was number 16 on Billboard. Okay. So that's okay. But again, one top 10 hit. The rest of the stuff, it kind of came and went. The music video for "Hold On Tight." You ever see the music video?
I did. Yeah,
it's one of the worst music videos ever made. Yes. At the time, it was the most expensive music video ever made. It had the record.
Yeah,
I'm like, that piece of
shit.
turn on a plate. It's in all black and white. It's so corny. ELO is kind of barely in it.
It doesn't really reflect what the album is about.
Yeah, it's so goofy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that thing was the most you wasted your money, fella. Yeah. I'm sorry.
It would have been better to put the music to like scenes from a movie.
Yeah, or just,
you know what I mean? Like, take some sci-fi movie and put somebody posted a video of one of the outtakes from the album when Time Stood Still to there was a sci-fi movie back in the day with oh geez. He was the guy who was by himself. It was oh my god, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
What, the Omega Man?
No. Oh, for goodness sake, I can't think of it right now. But Bruce Stern. Bruce Stern was the character.
Not Boy and His Dog.
No,
it's something like that though, right? He's like the last man on earth kind of thing, and they put it to When Time Stood Still, and I think it's great. Look, that's really cool. So I'll probably think of the title. Yeah, anyway. and Twilight was used in 1985 for some anime thing. It was used without their permission. So yeah, this kind of stuff adapts well to the futuristic kind of thing. It was possibly planned on being a double album, so there were 3 songs that kind of didn't make the cut, which was When Time Stood Still, Julie Don't Live Here No More, and The Bouncer, which is a really great song. And you can't even hear these anymore on Spotify. They used to have the 2001 or whenever it was, 2006.
Yeah, I don't know why they
remaster on Spotify, and they took it away, which had these bonus tracks on them. You can find them on YouTube, but you don't really need it. You can listen to Time as one thing, and it is just a masterpiece. I mean, I can go back to this and kind of listen to it, and I was listening to it again. Now I'm listening to it today or the past couple of days. I was listening to it critically, and not as the 14-year-old kid. Because whenever I listen to Time, I listen to it as a 14-year-old kid. Like nothing. When I listen to it, nothing has changed. I listen to it with those ears, and now I'm like, well, I need to listen to this now, like to talk about it. The only talking I ever do about Time is in my head. And now I'm listening to it, and I'm okay. And that's when I'm hearing these other things, like the song "The Lights Go Down."
Yeah.
I'm hearing Roy Orbison now. Like I'm hearing his, that big voice that Jeff has when he wants to channel Roy Orbison. It's there on The Lights Go Down.
Yeah, those little things that we've discovered over the years. You're always finding out something new about your favorite artists, and now, when you go back and listen, you're most certainly you start absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's great. It's fun. It's like listening. It's like hearing it for the first time all over again, and it's just it adds something to it. So
because I usually have all that stuff shut off. Like when I listen to ELO, that stuff is shut off. It's just kind of like I'm not listening to it to be critical. I'm listening it to
enjoy it.
I'm putting the 14-year-old ears on again. And just kind of, this is my music. This is like the safe place you go to, and you kind of put it on, and you don't question it, and you just listen. But now listening to it, I'm like, I'm consciously like, okay, I'm listening to this stuff, and what am I hearing? And what is somebody else going to get? Why would somebody else want to listen to this? No one's going to want to listen because it's my favorite album. That's great. Maybe one person or two people might. Why else would somebody else? Why else would somebody listen to this?
Yeah, well,
because it's not classic ELO either. So you can't say, well, if you like Living Thing, you're going to love Time, because it doesn't equate.
Well, I mean, you can make that's the thing. I mean, can you really talk anybody into liking this album? That's a really good question. I don't know if I talk them into listening to it. I don't know if I want to, though. It's like you say,
or if you don't want it, to hell with you.
No, in the beginning, you you pointed out, it's like it's ours, So sometimes you just feel like, well, maybe I don't want to refer this to somebody, or because they may not get it. And somebody could listen to this album and think, oh, this is borderline really cheesy on the one hand, and I could see that.
Sure.
Because of just the brashness of what it's about, and some people just aren't into that. They're not.
It's too noisy, and it's too much going on.
They're just not into the sci-fi thing, or the whole like electronic thing, or whatever it may be. But if you are a fan of that stuff, I would urge you to check it out and to to really dig in and just understand what he was trying to convey there. And I don't know. It's definitely the whole album for me is an earworm in a very good way, though. It's like it's just from beginning to end, it brings back memories that I had already. Like it's weird because I would listen to this album, and it's like those things are already. I'm already thinking back to something that didn't exist yet. Like I'm thinking about like what am I thinking about right now? What am I remembering? Because this music is so lush and it evokes dreams. It's like dreams, like a dreamscape type of like sound. But what exactly am I thinking about? Am I thinking about my childhood? Because I'm only 15 at this point.
Yeah.
So why does this album sound so already? It sounds so like reflective and so like in that zone. And that's the beauty of music. That's what the power of this kind of thing does for you, like that, and knowing what to do with it. Like in Ticket to the Moon, there's that little bit, that little interlude in the middle, that really quiet moment that, with the little bass line, you know what I'm talking about? It's like, who writes stuff like that, man? That's composition. That's not just songwriting. That is composing. It's like you're composing a score there for something. And it's like evoking that feeling, and it's those little moments that are just so brilliant on it. And it's just,
and you know what, that's one of the things. And you make a really good point, because I thought about this earlier. That's why he's able to pull this off. That's why it doesn't sound like 80s music.
Yeah.
Because 80s music was kind of disposable. It was very glossy sounding. We beat that into the ground, but this was kind of foreshadowing that, but by someone who writes music. Who kind of was experimenting with the tools, but already had a skill set. He had already made his money and his millions and had the ELO sound. And now it's like, let's play. Yeah. Because that's what it was, is him, cut, like I said in the beginning, kind of cutting ranks, reducing the size of ELO. ELO is like a, 7 person endeavor. With the strings and everything, unwieldy on stage, not happy touring with that, couldn't get the right sound. He does Xanadu, which was would be the last vestige of I don't even know what it sounds like, Xanadu, because it doesn't sound like Discovery. Because Discovery was decidedly a disco-y, upbeat type of music.
It's starting
and
to
then the
go
stuff
there.
for Xanadu doesn't sound like Time at all, but it doesn't sound like Discovery either. It's kind of like a limbo thing, but it's great. I love that period.
Yeah.
And then he kind of cuts away even more and says, now we're down to a 4-piece. We'll use Mick Kaminsky for violin just where we need him, but that whole orchestral thing is gone. There are some strings on this, but not sweet talking woman strings,
right. It's
and
not,
evil
it's not
woman
a pretty cool
strings.
orchestra.
And
yeah.
yeah, like that, like you said, that has been replaced by chirps and beeps and swirls, but they still fit and they still occupy the same space that the strings would have. So it's he strips down ELO, but he doesn't strip down the sound. He just changes the sound. He's able to do more with less people, in a way.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the last ELO efforts to do, like Secret Messages. This and Secret Messages, I think, but like Balance of Power, like he really stripped down that sound
down to a trio,
and that's when it became Jeff Lynne. That
was him on the way out. That was him fulfilling the contract and saying, "Okay, one left."
This is the producer Jeff Lynne stepping in now. This is a wholly different.
You need one more album. Here it is.
And you have that sound, that signature Jeff Lynne sound on that record, and everything after that is decidedly much more minimal. And
absolutely.
And I really wish that at some point that he would actually go back and try something like this again. Not necessarily this electronic sound, but something as lush, something as
he's really minimalistic now. I mean, he's even stripped away his own,
because he's doing everything himself.
He's down to guitar, drum, bass, and vocal and piano, and he does it himself, and then uses technology to replicate the strings, which I'm not that much of a fan of. I like he's great at whatever he does, but this was kind of the beginning of him starting to kind of wind it down and kind of, all right, ELO are kind of done. Contract is winding up. Secret Messages was supposed to, the album after this was supposed to be a double album. And I think that would have finished the contract, and Epic or Sony was like, nah, make it one. And then he would, ELO would limp along, because that would be the last. Secret Messages would kind of be like Kelly Graucut's exit. He wasn't on that album all that much, actually. He was on it just a little. Most of it was Jeff Lynne taking over.
That was his,
And by the time you get to Balance of Power, it's a trio. They may as well have been the Police.
Right. I was going to say, like, Time could be the last, like, full-on band effort. Yeah. Because it still has that lushness to it. And
and you still hear Kelly Graucut in there.
Kelly Graucut,
his great bass work on this album. Like,
oh my goodness.
From the end of the world.
Yours truly.
I mean, the guy is so we talked about it in our New World Record episode. We love Kelly Graucut, and he's just underutilized and so underappreciated.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a shame. You don't really hear him too much on here. He starts to get, like, vocally, he starts to get drowned. You start to hear the Jeff Lynne kind of replicate type thing.
The higher vocals. And,
and
harmonizing with himself as opposed to harmonizing with someone else,
it's like, I could do it, it starts to be economical. It's like, nothing, like, probably no hard feelings. Like, I can just do this myself now. So why? And he's that person, and it's funny. I was thinking about this too. It's like, people seek out Jeff Lynne to, can you help me with this? Has he ever sought anybody out to help him? No. He doesn't say, I want to work with, can you help me with my thing? Can you come in and do this? Like, he is so self-contained and so self-assured, but the humblest guy you'd ever probably meet.
Yeah.
People seek him out, but he does not. I don't think it's for ego. I think he's just like, I'm happy doing it myself. I can do it myself.
Because he's making the music he wants to make. If he were doing something that was, he was way in over his head about, like trying to recreate something. Yeah.
He'd probably figure it out anyway.
He probably would.
He'd probably figure, do something, and Time, it opened the 80s in a way that, like, I don't think people were ready for this yet. And that might've been the thing too. It must've been very jarring to hear Shine a Little Love, to hear Don't Bring Me Down,
to hear the disco
to hear
thing
all over the world, to hear Xanadu, and then hear something like Twilight or Hold On Tight, which is very kind of, it sounds like them, but
because that's what it became. And I don't think anybody really knew that at the time. And that's why, like, the critics, like,
they didn't know what to make of it.
This is, what is this? This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. But that's, a lot of the groups took it in that direction. I hear little snippets of, like, the way things are played, some of the keyboard. I hear it in Naked Eyes. I hear OMD. I do hear these synth pop bands, and not just, sound similar, but the same chord structures happening, the same sound sonically, like the way the synthesizers are, and the way, I hear that line in, like, Naked Eyes. I hear promises, where he's, right after he says the line promises, and you hear that, and you hear that little keyboard going, like, I hear that in Yours Truly, 2095, that sound of that keyboard and the same chord. I'm like, so he's already doing it before it even became a thing. So as far as I'm concerned, this album was way ahead of its time. And
it was, and only a scant few, even in the early 80s, Steve Winwood said, hey, this was an inspiration for me as well. He would have his career resurgence. He sounds nothing like ELO, but that doesn't mean he's not listening to that and being influenced by what could be or how these tools could be used, because he's a keyboard player extraordinaire, and again, not like his stuff sounds futuristic. Any of the stuff that he did for his comeback was nothing like that, but
he did employ a lot of the tools of the day, more synth,
and the feel,
a little bit more, so
those
inspiration horns that sound that are replicated, on the
like
keyboard.
Roll With It,
but that was
Roll With It by Steve Winwood.
But everybody was doing it, and that's where my biggest critique of 80s music is, like, it's not the real stuff. Why do you want to emulate something like that when it's not for a specific reason or a purpose? It's just doing it because it's easier, or it's like just because you just want to play with the tools of the day.
That was the thing. That was that was the flavor of the month.
Flavor of the month. But it didn't translate well to me with rock music, especially. I think they were the biggest sort of outliers in that sense, because it just didn't go like that crappy keyboard sound to like a rock band just didn't didn't quite work. Like some of the people carried over into the 80s, and they just but Jeff Lynne knew exactly what he was doing. That's the thing. That's the difference. It's like,
you actually just said what was the, like, why do this if there's no point?
Yeah.
Let me point to Another Heart Breaks, which is kind of it's the closest thing to an instrumental. It's just like another, he just says Another Heart Breaks throughout it. That was him experimenting with the keyboard. He wanted to see if he can get a keyboard to sound like a guitar.
Yeah.
So if you listen to that, it almost sounds like it's a processed guitar.
It's like a synth guitar
with some stuff on it, but it's actually a keyboard. So he was trying, like, there was some, let me use these tools, but with a reason. I want to see if I can get a keyboard to sound like a guitar, and emulate that and replicate it, and then use that in a song.
Yeah.
So that's someone who's kind of, like not just, hey, I'm going to play some keyboards and do like this atmospheric instrumental thing. Here's what I want to do with it, though. Here's the experiment is, can I get this to sound like a guitar?
Yeah.
While we're doing it. So I've got an instrumental in my head that I could do with the guitar, but let's see if I can use the toy and get it to sound close that you'd be, you wouldn't be sure what it was. So, you got to kind of, and because I've always wondered, like, why is that song on there? It's like kind of like, it's kind of instrumental. It's atmospheric. It closes out side one, which is great.
Yeah, but like I said before, like it evokes those like that sadness, that that longing for memory, and it's just
and then the other side, it opens with Rain Is Falling on the other side, and you got this rainstorm coming in, and he's just so good at that stuff. Like, he's just so, that's always the thing about ELO is, and it's still about his production, everything, like, he makes things fit, like, and even Paul McCartney said, he goes, all these little things are going on, and Paul McCartney said, and it just fits.
It does fit. And he's still evoking that classic, very, very classic feel, by the way, that classical, when you hear like Rain Is Falling, those little voices, like little operatic type voices.
Yeah, like, the oohs and ahs.
Like the rain, old man is snoring, the rain is falling. But especially on, like, in between Twilight and Yours Truly, there's that, you hear the footsteps of the guy walking down the hall, and you hear this voice, like this operatic voice, almost could be the same opera singer from.
That's actually 21st Century Man backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those little interludes is actually that's the 21st Century Man looped backwards, and because they do it at the end of that as well, but in between Hold On Tight.
But to me, it's like
that same little interlude.
It's like evoking, but it's calling back to like Rock Area from New World Record. Those
even Face the Music
vocals.
with the backward masking too.
Yeah,
so a lot of callbacks, and like I said, the similar thematic thing with El Dorado of this person that's transported to somewhere else, so that seems to be a theme that he likes to kind of gravitate towards. And El Dorado is a nice companion piece. They sound nothing alike, but they're two concept albums about similar themes, and you can kind of probably listen to both and kind of see the through lines between the two. They are somewhat similar. But this one is just, there's a lot of longing in this album, and I didn't really realize that until, like I said, I listened to it with kid ears, so I'm listening to it and being excited. But when you listen to the lyrical content, it's like, wow, it's just like wants to contact go back, and everyone thinks this is going to be so great. If you got transported to the future, I'd be, and maybe it ain't all that great. Yeah,
it's actually one of the saddest albums I've ever heard
about the future. Yeah, it's
yeah.
I mean, it ends on kind of a little positive. There's a little positive uplift of hold on tight to your dreams, and there is a little bit there, but a lot of it is kind of this person experiencing this, and how do you feel?
No good could come from lamenting the past and just staying in the past, because even if he had gone back there, which I read that. One of the tracks, like Julie Don't Live Here Anymore, he actually does make it back. And that's what the song is about, but she's not there anymore. Time still is moving forward. And even if he went back, you can't stop it. Because even if you're going to get there eventually anyway. So why,
just like the lyric from Hold On Tight, time just rolls on and on. Right.
That's right.
It's just, and at the end, at the very end with the epilogue, he's just singing the word time. And it's just kind of overlapping. Time, it just different, different notes, different, whatever notes that he's singing it in. And it just kind of overlaps and it just kind of washes over. And it's this story. It's just a really great, simple story. It's not complex. It's not the proggy, crazy thing where there's 15 characters you got to follow and it's weird.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you this question. Do you consider this a prog album?
People do. This is considered like an electronic, well, let's go back. I mean, the first 3 ELO albums were considered prog. I mean, they were kind of, this was, early ELO was avant-garde.
Yeah.
It was straight, because of the melding
most certainly.
of the over, like the heavy-handed melding of the cellos and the thing, and especially their second album was very proggy. There was only 5 songs on it. They were like 6 minutes each.
Yeah.
And then then Jeff Lynne kind of slowly whittled it down. There was a pop guy always underneath there. He just had to figure out the formula. I guess you could consider this something like a futuristic prog album, I suppose, but it's too poppy. It's just too poppy.
You asked me this question in the Abacab episode, and you said, is prog, has it gone away? And I guess I really didn't. I guess I don't think I answered
sustainable long term.
I don't think I answered the question quite completely. I think it hasn't gone away, and I think prog to me suggests that it could be multiple genres within. Prog to me suggests that you're doing something more than just a simple thing, and you're not playing the same 4 chords or whatever. So anybody who does that, I could consider prog music. And I think that's true. I think, there's metal prog, there's pop, there's the classical thing, there's the Baroque kind of stuff like old Genesis. And there's this weird, I mean, some people take it to that extreme, but I think it's most certainly still alive today. There's so many bands out there that I've never even heard of that are doing very much this kind of thing. And they're considered prog bands, electronic music. So I don't know. It's very much alive, and I think anybody who keeps looking over that fence and who wants to do something just a little bit more, adding those little bits, and like Jeff Lynne did with this record, most certainly, I do consider this a prog.
Yeah,
album,
it
no
would
doubt.
certainly have. Yeah, you could certainly look for that. You could certainly see those leanings.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a pop craftsman. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like what his thing is. So anything
Yeah.
he adds to it is layering. Like that's what his
Well, that's his gift. He
yeah,
captures your attention. That's what I think.
yeah,
That's what he said about
that's what
the
he's so
song
good at.
"Secret Messages" itself. I think he was
Yeah,
quoted as saying, "I wanted to get people's attention with all the sound effects." And the song really doesn't mean anything per se, but it's just
there's a lot going on.
there's a lot going on in
Yeah.
that song to listen to. Like it's
That's on their next
interesting,
album. Yeah,
and that's what I love. I love that kind of
yeah,
something when you're sonically prepared to hear something so different and so
yeah.
busy and so that the next time you hear it, you're going to hear something different each time.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's what I've always loved about them, and that's why I've loved about the Lindsey Buckingham solo stuff, right? Is because there's so much there. There's so much to chew on. He's very much the same way of a song architect.
Yeah.
And like I said, there are other song architects, but maybe they do it to lesser, some stuff does sound like gobbledygook, and it's just like, it gets to a level of droning where there's so much going on that you can't
it's just
pick it
simple
out.
noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just noise that is just, it grates on your nerves. But again, that's something that like Nine Inch Nails. I mean, that's, I kind of like that though, because I like the idea of this guy wanting to make me hate this music so much that it's likable in that way. It's
reverse
perverse
psychology.
it's actually perverse. Like it's very perverse way of getting somebody to like your music is to make them as uncomfortable as you can. And that's the genius of Trent Reznor with him. Yeah. So
you end up going back for more.
Yeah, that's right.
Favorite tracks? You got some standouts?
Standouts for me would be Twilight and Yours Truly.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the whole first side.
Okay.
I could, all the way through. I think I really don't want to pick any one song out of that. Mm-hmm. It just flows for me from beginning to end. The prologue to
you have to listen. If you listen to Twilight, you have to listen to the prologue first.
Yeah,
like you can't.
That's right. That
like
build
it is
up.
So magic. Yeah, it is just so like kind of. It sets you up and gets you ready to listen to that song.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, like when I would have like a Spotify mix or stuff would be shuffled.
Yeah.
And Prologue would just come up because it was on time, but not like, why am I listening to Prologue? Like I needed to stop. I would actually stop and go and like put on time. Cause I'm like, I can't listen to Prologue and then not have Twilight after it.
That's
like, what is, I don't want to hear like Prologue and then Lido shuffle after it. Like it doesn't make sense, right? It's like
what's a Cylon, like
it's not a standalone thing. You need to, if you listen to Prologue, you need Twilight to follow it.
You do. So absolutely. And the songs run into each other too, which is, sometimes it's hard to, even if you're trying to make a playlist and you want to pick those songs, you're always going to get that little piece right before
little twinklings, little drip
previous song, and it's like, oh damn it, so you're trying to go back and you're trying to fix it somehow, but you can't.
Yeah, Secret Messages is the same way. He kind of strung them all together with little interludes and little backwards things, and that's what makes it so great to listen to, though. Like I said, because he does it so well. It's not ham-fisted, and it doesn't sound forced. It just kind of. The album just kind of flows. So
he requires you to listen to it as an album, and that's
this one you have to. And it's
one of the geniuses of that is like, this is an album. This isn't. You can't really cherry pick.
Hard to drop the needle on this because you wouldn't know where.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
If you have the vinyl, it's kind of.
So what about you?
They kind of go into each other.
What's some of your favorites?
I've really been digging the stuff on side 2 recently, like. Because I think that a lot of that stuff, like it's very easy to dive into side 1 and kind of, that's like the first part of the story. I think a lot of the gems though, like I said, is like from the end of the world, the lights go down, just great. Like that guitar, like, oh man, he's so, and his vocal on that one is just so, so emotive on that. So,
Yeah.
Like it's Jeff Lynne, like we've never heard him before, really.
He really and like Ticket to the Moon is like that too for me.
Yeah.
It's like his but like I from the End of the World, I remember back in the day, I never really liked that song, but that song really grew on me over the years.
It's got the interlude in the middle, and that bass is just Kelly Gruck is going to town.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's earned it. He wasn't getting paid a lot. He earned every dime. He didn't get a lot of money, but that dude earned it, man. He really was the secret weapon. And that bass is still prevalent on this. Like you said, on yours truly 2095 as well. I like that song just because it's so strange. And it really does talk about futuristic things and falling in love, the notion of falling in love with someone that's artificial, that can't give back, but you are you're imprinting your feelings because they look like someone,
right?
The robot has no feeling about it and doesn't care.
Could she be as human as you are? But in this case, it's not. You can't replace.
Yeah, and the lyrics like maybe one day I'll feel her cold embrace and kiss her interface. Till then I'll leave her alone. It's like he understands it too. Like this is not right.
Understands that the technology
his wife Sandy is the voice of the computer, of the robot.
Really?
She says, "Is that what you want?" That was his wife at the time, Sandy. She provided that voice. So
I love the second verse with Bevan. Bevan really shines on that song too. His drums just when the song gets to that point and it kicks into that second verse and Bevan's just and it's that steady beat.
Yeah.
And then when the strings kick in with those voices, those operatic voices, that's a beautiful. Absolutely
a little bit of classic ELO in there. You get a little throwback of classic ELO there.
Sublime.
There's some sprinklings of that. Yeah, Sublime. Very much. There are some of those sprinklings.
I say it's exquisite.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you can listen to this with headphones on, so much the better. This was made. Eric's a big proponent of the headphone experience, and this one was made for it. This really was made for headphones. If you sit down. Close your eyes and take the trip, or leave your eyes open and read the lyrics to kind of, again, it's not deep storytelling, but the lyrics kind of really help position these songs and help position the story. It's not a deep story, but it's about one person and their feelings. I think we all think about that. If I was in the future, could I travel in time? Would I go forward? And what? And it's something,
not so much today, I don't think, but because I don't want, now we're all looking back, and this like I said, this character is us
the lyrics
now.
of remember the good old 1980s is looking a lot better to me.
Yeah,
when things were so uncomplicated. I know we can't, but you know what? He had a timer on that lyric, and God, he was right about it.
He was.
He didn't know.
Absolutely was. And
he's only
30,
that's 33, 32 at the time.
That's the beauty of it, but also it's very bittersweet at the same time.
It really is, because again, at the time when we listened to it, it was so new. It was like, what, okay. Yeah. And then now 41 years later, it's like, oh, okay. Gotcha. Mm-hmm. You were right.
Yep.
You were right. You was right. and so we would highly advocate to to close out on the episode we did for New World Record.
Mm-hmm.
We both agreed that somebody that never listened to ELO, New World Record is the one they should listen to, right? We kind of agreed that that's the introductory album.
Mm-hmm.
This is not that.
No,
this is probably the antithesis. Not that this is like don't let the sales betray you, because like I said, it's aged like fine wine. Like at the time,
I think it has
not fans now in retrospective reviews, it's heralded, it's lauded for being ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Like I said, at the time it was like ELO is long in the tooth and put them out of their misery already. It wasn't time yet to.
Certainly
wasn't
not
time
on this,
yet. There was
certainly
not
on this, not on this album. No.
Yeah.
This was not the album to say that. Maybe you make that argument about Secret Messages. There's certain
not
songs
Secret
on
Messages. That's great. No.
Balance of, well, I don't necessarily, I'm not making that for myself. Okay. I'm just saying I could understand some people. But the Balance of Power was the one that, there's just kind of like, okay, guys, put it to put it to bed.
You know what? I didn't like that when it first came out, but I love that album now.
Yeah,
it was like, what are saxophones doing on an ELO album? And I'm like, I was like, why?
Oh, that was an '80s thing too. A sax.
I was like, come on,
sexy sax.
But now I'm like, oh my God, I love Balance of Power. It's like, oh, it's so great. Again, the guy, you just got to trust the guy. That's the thing. And back then it was sappy, it was corny, it was cheesy, but he kind of came around and people really understood or appreciated what he was doing. And he was just doing it for himself, at that point. At this point, he was just kind of making the stuff he wanted to do. And that was it, finishing out the contract with Sony and see what the future held. And it had great things ahead for him, had better things ahead for him. But now people look back at this catalog and are like, wow, look at some of the stuff. Look at what he was doing kind of under our noses while people were kind of poo-pooing it. Mm-hmm. Some years later, it got the remasters, it got the re-releases with the extra, the extra songs and everything. So anyway,
yeah, I think
we've advocated, right?
Yeah, it's kind of
closing
sad.
Thoughts.
Closing thoughts. It is
it's sad.
It's now a heavy sense of nostalgia is attached to it, but it already had that from the very start. I guess that's another word we could use to describe it. But you're right. It does make me kind of sad now that we have talked about it. Because now it's like, yeah, that's What
did Spock say in Star Trek? Having isn't always as good as wanting.
Right? Yeah,
it's satisfying.
It's not logical, but it's often true. It's absolutely right.
But But hopefully people will listen to it and check it out. It's not going to change it's not going to change your life. We were at a particular point in our lives where this stuff was there for us. It was the intersection.
Mm-hmm.
The perfect time. This is not for someone that's older now. It's not going to change your life. But I think if you appreciate music, you can kind of pick up on this little gem from a group that was known for something specific that kind of went and kind of flipped the script in the 80s before anybody else did, and did it better than what would come in the 3 years after.
Yeah.
It is not representative of this. The thing that when I first heard the Eurythmics, I always thought, I'm like, wow. I was kind of like, yeah, ELO was kind of like, for some reason, the first time I heard Eurythmics, like Sweet Dreams Are Made of This or something, I'm kind of like, yeah, this was already done. I was already thinking like, this is kind of some of the sound or textures were already visited on time. Like I was already then, I was kind of like, I felt like I knew.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, this was already ahead of its time. It was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the glossy stuff would happen. So what do you think? That'll do it for Time. Check it out. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's been re-released on vinyl as well. Check out the corny music video on on YouTube. My God, it's a horrible video. It is the worst. Mm-hmm. But go see it anyway as a curiosity. But check it out. And that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram at 3324 podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe below. Leave a comment below as well. Let us know what you think about the album Time. Are we overblowing it? Is this too much bloviating, or did we pique your interest enough to check this out?
Yeah,
if you have checked it out, let us know what some of your favorite tracks are.
Yes,
and how you
please.
feel about it. All right,
please do. Yep.
So that's going to do it for this episode. For Eric, this has been Dean. We will see you on the flip side.